Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my Superman Man of Steel 2 video. They revealed what the plot of Man of Steel 2 was going to be when Henry Cavill was still Superman. They had a bunch of different plans for the future of Superman up to about October before James Gunn was hired. Then he elected to reboot all of DC movies. So Henry Cavill had filmed some other cameo scenes that I'll explain, and they'd written Man of Steel 2. So we'll explain what the plot of that was going to be, and what their original plan for Henry Cavill's Superman was heading forward into more Justice League sequels and eventually a movie version of Crisis on Infinite Earths. If you're brand new to the channel, obviously there's a bunch of chaos in DC movies right now. James Gunn said that he would reveal the full DC Phase 1 really soon. So of course I'll do videos for all that stuff. Be sure to subscribe to get all those videos because there'll be a lot of big stuff happening in the next couple of weeks. But writer Stephen DeKnight, who wrote on the original Smallville series with Tom Welling's Superman back in the day, in the Daredevil Netflix series, a bunch of other stuff, revealed the plot of Man of Steel 2. He said that he'd written it for the studio before James Gunn had been hired. The actual plot confirms a lot of our fan theories about where they would take Man of Steel 2. Like, we're talking about Man of Tomorrow. Like, where are they going to go with the Superman character after the Justice League Snyder cut? Which big comic book villains from Superman's comics would they introduce that he hasn't fought yet? What had happened is that Henry Cavill originally had worked out a handshake deal to come back once in the Black Adam movie with the understanding on his part that the studio would make Man of Steel 2 and he'd just become a much bigger character. And in October 2022, right after the Black Adam movie came out, Warner Brothers, the studio executives in charge of all that, specifically told him to announce his grand return as Superman and tease Man of Steel 2 with more future Superman projects, more future appearances from his character. We then found out that he'd already filmed another cameo scene for the Flash movie, which is coming out in 2023 this year.
I wanted to wait until the weekend was over before posting this, because I wanted to give you all a chance to watch Black Adam. But now that plenty of you have, I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman. And the image you see on this post and what you saw in Black Adam are just a very small taste of things to come. So there's a lot to be thankful for, and I'll get to that in time. But I want to thank you guys most of all. Thank you for your support and thank you for your patience. I promise it will be rewarded.
During that clip, the upcoming stuff that he was teasing was a combination of those cameos that he filmed for the DC movies coming out in 2023, like the Flash movie cameo, which I'll explain, but also the Man of Steel 2 movie, like the next solo Superman movie. You probably remember a couple months ago the CEO of Warner Brothers making all those statements about them refocusing their efforts on DC movies, making Superman a much bigger priority than he's been in the past. So everybody was like, oh, this is great news for Superman fans. We're going to be eating really good. And at the time that all those Superman announcements were being made earlier this year, Henry Cavill had already filmed his cameo for the Flash movie. It was going to help set up their movie version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, future Justice League movies. Reportedly, he was supposed to show up to the Flash, appear to him when he was inside the Speed Force, and he would have teased some coming big crisis, like their movie version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, like they did on the TV show, but just like way, way bigger. Originally, the studio had their own 10-year plan for DC movies that would have culminated in Crisis on Infinite Earths, so they had all these other movies that they were planning. They were going to use the Flash movie to help set that up, like tease all this upcoming stuff. By November, though, like just a month after he posted that video on the orders of the studio, James Gunn was hired, elected to reboot all DC movies, like they just wipe the slate clean and start fresh, and reportedly, they removed Henry Cavill's cameo scene from the Flash movie because if you think about it, if that was meant to set up like the next 10 years of their original plan, why tease a bunch of things that they weren't planning on paying off because James Gunn had completely different plans? There was also supposed to be a Gal Gadot Wonder Woman cameo in the Flash movie too. They might have removed that. I did a video on it a couple of days ago because there was like a clip with the director talking about Gal Gadot Wonder Woman, about a version of Multiverse Zod being one of the villains. I actually got contacted by Warner Brothers. They're like, could you please remove that part of the video? The filmmakers don't want that part online. I was actually surprised to hear that Wonder Woman did have a cameo during the Flash movie. If they really did remove those cameo scenes from the Flash movie, hopefully at some point they'll release them on deleted scenes or just release them separately from the movie because it sounded like they were really cool. But while the studio's original plans were being made, those cameos were being filmed, they were still planning on making Man of Steel 2, like the next solo Superman movie, meeting with writers, preparing scripts, and writer Stephen DeKnight revealed his version of Man of Steel 2 was like the last one that they had settled on before James Gunn was hired and decided to get rid of Henry Cavill and basically passed on his script. Like in his statement, he basically says that the movie that he wrote didn't jive with James Gunn's plan for the future of Superman because we found out James Gunn was writing a new Superman movie himself with a much younger version of the character, and that was the whole reason why he recast Henry Cavill. What would have happened originally, though, is that in his Man of Steel 2, It would have picked up after the events of the Blue Beetle movie. If you look at the DC Movies timeline here, this is only current as of 2023. A couple things got delayed, like Aquaman 2 is coming out a little bit later at the end of 2023 now. And between now and Man of Steel 2, Superman would have had a few more cameos so that he wasn't totally absent on screen for a couple more years before the movie actually came out. I believe they would have released the movie around 2025, so you would have started hearing them casting and directors, all that news in the next year or so. We don't know a ton of their plans for the movies that would have come out in 2024 and 2025, aside from Man of Steel 2, but we did hear about Wonder Woman 3, which they also canceled recently, and we found out about a legit Batman Beyond movie with Michael Keaton and Terry McGinnis that the studio was planning on making before the reboot. That would have also probably come out around 2025. The studio had a lot of plans for Michael Keaton's Batman in the next couple of years. Really good example of that is the Batgirl movie, which he was in, that they canceled as well. The actual events of Man of Steel 2 would have had Henry Cavill Superman facing a version of DCEU Brainiac, and it sounds like the plot would have been somewhat similar, a little bit different, but similar to the plot of the more recent Brainiac storyline in the last 10 years or so. Back during the big New 52 reboot, Jeff Johns, Gary Frank did a big Superman arc, kind of reintroducing the character, reintroducing a lot of his core characters and villains like Brainiac. So Brainiac comes, he faces him, defeats him, and in the process winds up releasing a lot of the bottled cities that Brainiac had captured, including the bottled city of Kandor, where Supergirl comes from, releasing thousands of Kryptonians on the world. Which will remind you of Lex Luthor's quote during Batman v Superman, kind of tying things back around to the earlier Snyderverse movies, "The Red Capes are coming." Way more Kryptonian stuff happening on planet Earth just in general, for better and worse. Man of Steel 2 wouldn't have directly adapted the comic book storyline. There would have been some Easter eggs for that, so it would have been the exact same story. It still would have been relatively original. But for example, they were introducing the new Sasha Calais Supergirl during the Flash movie. She's still in the movie, but the future of her character is kind of in question now with James Gunn's reboot. Her Superman symbol looks exactly like the same design as Henry Cavill's Superman symbol, so it sounds like even though she comes from the multiverse, the version of Krypton that they both came from, the planet, is very similar. I think as a way to tie her character to Henry Cavill's Superman so that they could be together in a movie. I don't know if she was supposed to be in Man of Steel 2, but it does sound like they had plans to sort of weave those characters together. They didn't say whether or not Lex Luthor was a big part of Man of Steel 2, or if they were bringing back Jesse Eisenberg Lex Luthor. It's hard to continue doing Superman in the movies without doing a version of Lex Luthor, just because he's so critical to the character. Ben Affleck had still planned on leaving the role of Batman. That wasn't going to change. He'd still filmed a cameo scene for Aquaman 2. I don't know if they deleted that as well too now because of the big reboot. But because the way they reshuffled the movies, Aquaman 2 was supposed to be his last appearance as the character, as far as we know. And they'd originally planned on using the Flash movie with the Flashpoint twist to set up Michael Keaton's Batman as the new multiverse crossover Batman who would show up in all the future Justice League movies whenever they needed it. In between the movies, it would just go back to his Earth. Like, you can't do a Justice League movie without Batman in it, so they need a Batman, and it wasn't going to be Robert Pattinson's Batman. So that's where they get to Michael Keaton Batman. What's happening now, though, as James Gunn already revealed, he wants to reboot the majority of all DC movies, recast most of the roles with new actors, including Henry Cavill's Superman. He's been writing a new Superman movie, which will be one of the first new movies in his DC Phase 1. It sounds like they still want to make Superman a priority, but just not Henry Cavill's Superman, with a younger version of the character earlier in his career, but it's not meant to be another origin story. Like, he was clear that it wasn't retelling the origin story. And it'll be more like Superman Year 2, which is almost exactly like the same vibe as what Matt Reeves did with the Robert Pattinson Batman movie. That was a movie set during Batman Year 2, still figuring out what the Batman character is going to be, what his whole ethos is, how he's going to save Gotham City in the best possible way. Batman hasn't become a symbol yet, so the whole idea is the same thing is happening in this new Superman movie. Superman is still kind of workshopping who the Superman character is going to be to the rest of the world. And because they're starting out with a new younger Superman, it sounds like in all the DC Phase 1 movies, they're sort of shifting the timeline so that when things pick up, all the Justice League characters are much younger versions. Like, a younger Superman means a younger Batman, younger Green Lantern, younger Flash, so on and so forth. The only real exceptions to that are people like Wonder Woman and Martian Manhunter. Even though it sounds like they might recast with younger actors, they're still super old chronologically. One of the weird things, though, is that James Gunn did say that Robert Pattinson's Batman will not be like the Justice League crossover Batman, and they are planning on doing a new Justice League movie in the next 4 to 5 years. Which implies they also plan on recasting another new younger Batman actor. Because around the time they'd be releasing this new Justice League movie, like Justice League Rebirth, whatever they're going to call it, Robert Pattinson would still be in the middle of making the Batman 3 with Matt Reeves at the pace that they're going. I suppose they could always delay the new Justice League movie like another year or two to give Matt Reeves time to do the Batman 3, and then maybe make Robert Pattinson's Batman crossover with the Justice League movies, or they just flat out recast a new younger Batman. So you can let me know in the comments, do you want them to just wait on Justice League for like 6 or 7 years and then have Robert Pattinson show up, or do you just want another younger Batman to show up and see Justice League in the next like 4 to 5 years? He'll be making his announcement on what those upcoming DC movies are going to be in the next couple of weeks. Of course, I'll do videos for it. Make sure you enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. There's also a new Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania trailer video with Kang dropping next week. Of course, I'll do a video for that. The Last of Us episodes are also starting really soon too. I will be doing episode videos for that. Everyone click here for that new Flash trailer and click here for that new Henry Cavill Warhammer trailer video and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.